Okay, team. So today I want to talk about why young men aren't growing up. Now, I've seen a lot of articles coming out from the mainstream media discussing this issue, and I laugh because most of these journalists are so disconnected from the young male psyche, from the unique challenges we face today, and from what men need. So, I wanted to add my 2 cents here and kind of explain this to all generations. So there's three main ideas I want to tunnel into here. One is lack of relationships and long-term partners. Two is land ownership versus fantasy. This is a really interesting idea. And the third one is lack of religious gathering spaces. Doesn't have to be Christian, but religion has been traditionally the center of community. And I want to talk about what that means when it goes away. Now, we're coming at all of this from a philosophically based point of view versus a political point of view. I'm not trying to push an ideology, I'm trying to understand the issue at the bottom of it. And being a young man, interacting with many young men, and coming from a philosophical background might add some lens to this, might add some perspective to this that most people totally miss. So let's dive into it. This is Wisdom Warriors. I'm Christian. We got a great video lined up for you here. So last night I went out and played pool with 5 guys in the city, and all of them in their late 20s, all of them single, and all of them haven't been in a serious relationship in a while. Think about how different that is from your grandparents' age, from your great grandparents' age, and even from your parents' age. Being single in your late 20s without a serious relationship. My friends, I don't think you understand how much that stunts growth. I know for me, being in a relationship for 5 years with a good woman taught me so much about being a man. It taught me about empathy, how to see from someone else's perspective. It taught me about the opposite sex in general. And all of that work that happens inside of a relationship is critical to growth. All the responsibility that happens is critical to growth. And most people are in bad relationships or just, not in relationships at all. Now, I'm not saying men always need to be in a relationship. In fact, a lot of growth can happen while you're single. But the thing is the men that I know who have never been in a committed, secure, long-term relationship are more psychologically infantile than the ones who have. Now, a lot of the people in the red pill, men going their own way space are going to rail against this idea. But the thing is men need women and women need men. We are meant to grow together. And relationships between the sexes are on the decline. Most men can't get women. They barely interact with women. They've largely been left behind. And this works to seriously stunt men's growth. And it's not just intimate relationships. To hit you with some stats, male loneliness in my generation is about 60% or higher. The number of guys that report not having a single close friend has 5x'd, quintupled in the past couple of decades. The number of relationships in high school has halved. The number of guys with 6 or more close friends has halved. The stats are just booming right now. There's a friendship problem going on. There's a relationship problem going on. And my friends, the thing is when you don't have close friends and meaningful relationships in life, what do? You seek pleasure. You go to fantasy worlds. I want to give you a little snapshot of the problem, and most people are going to be surprised by how ubiquitous this is. So, a couple months ago, I roomed with 2 20-year-old males for a very short period of time, and witnessing them go through their lives was one of the most depressing things I've ever seen. To be 20 in a male body means you have the most fire, energy, and ambition you're ever going to have. You have this opportunity to go expand and meet young people and do things and explore and experiment and figure out your dreams, but most people are not doing that anymore. These two would wake up around 11 or noon every day, kind of wander around on TikTok and playing video games until about 3 or 4. One would go to his serving job that he didn't like, and the other would go to his small community college class. They would come home late at night, snack and smoke weed late into the evening. Both of them didn't have any friends. I think they had one shared friend that they would see once in a while. And they weren't really doing anything in their lives. And honestly, inside of both of them, I just saw a deep sadness and loneliness. And both of them didn't have any love interest the entire time I was there. So a lot of people will hear stories like that and instinctively lean towards blaming the guys. Oh, they're low lives. They're addicted to video games and they don't have any direction and yada yada yada. Like there's something wrong with them. But in reality, there's actually something wrong with society. And this disease starts with college. Okay? College right now has a monopoly on social engagement. I didn't go to college and I spent 3 years desperately alone and isolated. And I'm an extroverted, like charismatic. I like building community. And it was really hard for me. I couldn't imagine most people. On top of that, college right now is 60% women, 40% men in America, and it's getting more and more unequal. A lot of men are opting not to go to these social indoctrination institution camps that don't give you any value unless you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Like, there's no point in spending all this money. I could make a whole video about this, but essentially, a lot of men aren't going to school, and those men have a lonely path in front of them because there's not large group familiarity outside of college anymore for young people. So if you're not going to college, it's really difficult to make friends, and that's because the foundation of friendship in huge ways is proximity. We need to be around people our age doing things. That's how you intermingle. That's how community expands and grows. That's how you build new friendships. Unless you're going to the bar or going to clubs, it's really hard to find large group familiarity, which my last video was about. And large group familiarity is essential for making the right friends and for dating. When you, Mark, and the boys are going out to play badminton and you see Sally and the girls and you're all mingling, and then a group of friends rolls by in their car and you're shouting back and forth, and that's how community used to grow. And unfortunately, that's really not happening. Everyone's kind of coming into their small clique or just watching Netflix and scrolling on TikTok at home. They don't have the social need to go out and about anymore. And so phones, dating apps, headphones, all these things are really changing how community interacts. And also, if you're not at college, you don't have proximity to many young people. And without proximity and shared purpose, rarely do men bond. This brings us to the second point here, is men bond through shared purpose, through doing things together, whether that's studying, playing games, climbing mountains, going to war. Like, man, male friendships have always been around cooperation in pursuit of something. And this is what we lack today. We lack a collective shared purpose and direct challenge that men are facing together. For all of human history, you had your tribe you were born in. Men trained together. They went to war together. They hunted together. They built houses together. They farmed together. They celebrated together. And then when they were old, they told stories around the fire together. But today, it's just isolated cells of people. And even if they have proximity to one another, like in college, they often lack shared purpose. So there's no sense of deep bonding. And this has to change, but in order for brotherhoods to be revived again, the issues discussed in part 2 of this video have to be resolved, and namely that is land ownership and open spaces. Okay, part 2 here on land ownership versus fantasy worlds. This is a very large idea. I want to compress as briefly as possible. I have family friends 30 minutes outside of Denver, and they bought a house a couple of decades ago for a handful of berries and change. And today, that house is worth $1.2 million, a very average family home, below average in some ways. And this is the reality across the country, is like very basic starter homes are unaffordable to my generation, and it's going to continue that way. And this creates a very different mindset in life. You see, my great-grandparents, my grandparents, even my parents were buying houses in their 20s, thinking about families, thinking long term. And this is what our founding fathers of America, someone like Thomas Jefferson, understood. Is there's 3 things that create a successful and flourishing republic. And the first one is land ownership. You see, land ownership is how someone becomes a citizen of society rather than just a consumer and passive observer of society. When you own land, think about how you would treat that land if you knew you're going to pass it on to your children, to your children's children, to your great grandchildren, and the opportunity it would give them. You would invest your heart and time into it. You would take on responsibility. And more than that, you would take on social responsibility because you want to have a good relationship with your neighbors. You want to see your school and your community flourish because you actually have a stake in it. There's meaning in it for you. If you're just a renter, you think really short term and you think mostly about yourself. And it's because, well, I'm not going to have this place in a couple years. I'm not going to have these neighbors in a couple years. I'm not going to have this community in a couple years. Why does it matter? You drive it like a rental. And this is what happens also on the country level is our presidents drive our economy like a rental. Everything in our society is a rental now. Think about this from someone in their 20s. They are living in a city disillusioned with corporate success, barely making enough to pay rent, let alone save up 100K to put a down payment on a house. They don't have many good friends. They're not participating in their community. They don't have a girlfriend. They're not thinking about raising a family. They're not thinking about the legacy that they want to create and what they want to leave behind and, taking on the responsibility of building a great life and building an empire. Ultimately, our prospects are really low today, and this lack of optimism and responsibility and ownership keeps boys stunted. It keeps them as boys because we need community and we need responsibility, especially with other men, if we really want to grow up. And we don't have that today. And that brings us to the second idea here that's really important, and that is masculinity flourishes on frontiers. I made many videos on this, but essentially, a frontier is where there's open space to conquer. There's danger, discomfort, and wildness to tame. This can be physical frontiers, like the founding of America and all the space and expansion west. It can be intellectual frontiers, like the Enlightenment, the exploration of the stars and science, and it can be business frontiers, starting a new venture. Wherever there's new space to conquer, men tend to flourish and they band together in brotherhoods to go master new spaces. And this even happens if you have, let's say you have like a farm and you have the opportunity to expand that farm and expand your family and pass it on. There's this sense of optimism. There's this rallying call, like you and your brothers and your uncles and your sons are on a mission together. And this is where male friendships grow and the masculine man arises. The masculine man arises on frontiers, like think of the Wild West, where Theodore Roosevelt went. It's like dangerous, wild place. And in these dangerous, wild places, men become men. They build self-reliance. They learn how to take care of themselves and others, how to cooperate in large groups, how to be industriousness and vigorous in their thinking and activity. And this is so important. When all spaces are conquered like today, where even the outskirts of the business world, the outskirts of technology, the outskirts of science, the outskirts of philosophy, and definitely the outskirts of physical land, all of this has been conquered. There's not much left. And when there's not much left, the heroic impulse inside of men gets crushed. And again, they take this back seat in life because they have no hope, no responsibility, no spaces they feel like they can go into and like claim for themselves. And man, that creates a really hopeless, resigned, and nihilistic population that likes to just retreat to fantasy worlds. So when you can't progress in real life, in your real job, in real physical space, what do? You play video games where you can do that. You play video games where you can actually level up and gain new skills and gain new mastery and expand your will to power. And that's all it is these video games are this replication of the real world, but a fantasy world. And when men can't get a girlfriend, what do? They watch pornography. They go on OnlyFans. They get, an anime girlfriend, AI girlfriend. They go to fantasy worlds because it's replacing the real biological instincts to have relationships and to have space to conquer. These are the two masculine needs, and I hope I could communicate that in a good package for you. And this is why most men are playing video games, lost in fantasy worlds, is simply because they have no hope to level up here. So the final point I want to make is the lack of religious spaces is seriously stunting men's growth and leading to massive social decay. In fact, if anything is going to bring about the fall of the West, It is the failing religion and lack or the chaos in the dating market. Those two things I think is going to be huge problems for our generation. So religion, we have to understand the broader context here is religion has been the center of culture for all of human history. There's been a shared religion. If you were a Scythian or Germanic tribe on the plain, you had a shamanic paganism. If you were in ancient Greece, you had this like pagan worship and ancient Rome that infiltrated every aspect of communal being. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hindu, yoga, Taoism, like every culture had its religious roots, its paganism, or its monotheism. And this did a lot of things for community. It showed how to interact with one another. It created these festivals or these days of holiday where everyone interacted and worshiped together. And there actually is something really powerful about the idea of church, where your whole community, like 95% of every single person in your community, shows up on a single day to worship together, to be in reverence together, to have a spiritual connection together, and also just to communicate, to talk. And during that time of being in church, there is a message, hopefully an uplifting and powerful, moral message communicated. Now, whether or not you agree with Christianity, that idea is really important because it creates a shared sense of morality, a shared sense of feeling and thinking about the world. And in postmodernism in the past couple of decades, we have totally lost that. And when people think and feel very differently, if one's a far right Christian and one's a leftist woke person, or one person is a total atheist and the other person is super spiritual, like there's not a lot of actually shared cohesion in community anymore because there's massive divergence in the way people think and feel. And also in secularism, most people just lack all spiritual connection whatsoever. And spiritual connection is actually the foundation of a great relationship with yourself and with other people. Like whether you're a pagan or you're a Christian, there's got to be something about religion that brings people together. Now, I've experienced a kind of a rebirth of religion amongst just my good friends. And every single Sunday, we'd get together to cold plunge, to sauna, to meditate, and in a way to like be in worship with one another, to have these like group discussions with one another and to play games and have a great time. And I think this was the original idea of church or a Sabbath or a day off, was to participate with your friends in a deep, meaningful way and an intentional way. And when we do this, I felt this sense of, almost like we were creating a shared sense of religion again, a shared sense of feeling and thinking and interacting with the world. And it creates a much deeper connection. Furthermore, when it comes to the youth, when it comes to young boys, historically, religious figures have always been the idol that they venerated. And veneration has a really interesting power in the male psyche. In fact, in the psyche of humanity, is whatever we venerate, we become akin to, we become like. When the boys of ancient Greece were told stories of the Iliad, were told stories of Heracles every single night, their entire aspiration and ideal was to become like Heracles, to be excellent and physically strong and capable and witty and, intelligent. They wanted to be like that. The same thing happened in ancient Scandinavia and Germany. The boys wanted to be like Thor. And then in the medieval times, the boys wanted to be like the Knights of Christ, the Knights Templars, facing down evil and doing good. All across the world, whatever hero we put at the center of culture, boys tend to emulate. They want to be like them. And right now in the West, we don't have a heroic figure anymore. We don't have a masculine ideal. Along with that lack of ideal, there's no unifying moral or religious foundation. And this works to seriously undermine social harmony. We need shared religious spaces because it helps unite community and direct boys' religious veneration, which is the most important force in determining who they become. And when that heroic impulse dies inside of us, boys stop growing. They stop facing challenges and overcoming them and becoming more wise, strong, compassionate, courageous, intelligent, formidable, self-reliant. Is because they don't have have something that they're going towards collectively. So, a lot more could be said about shared religious spaces. I don't think a rebirth of paganism or a rebirth of Christianity is actually possible. There's got to be something else that we create together. I would like to know your thoughts about that in the comments below. Thanks for being here. This is Wisdom Warriors. I'm Christian. If you want to talk to me one-on-one for really powerful sessions, there's a link in the description below. Furthermore, I have a free online community where we can go way deeper on school. Link for that below. I'll see you over there. Peace.